Hi there, it's Mick Wood here, CTO of InsightFactory.ai. Please join us as Peter Inge, CEO, and myself discuss the recent 2025 Databricks Data and AI Summit, where a ton of great announcements were released, and really our take on what that means for our data and AI programs and that of our customers.
Welcome to the first of the Factory Fireside technical series. Here today, importantly, to debrief the recent Databricks Data and AI conference. Now, Mick, lots happened.
A lot has happened, and we think our customers are going to be delighted with really where Databricks are taking the data and AI space, and really how us as Insight Factory, how we play into that equation too.
Now, before we dive into dissecting the conference, because there's a lot of really interesting stuff, strategic plays, great technologies coming out of this. One of the things I just want to open up with is, now, you, of all the people I know, have been on the Databricks bandwagon for as long as anybody that I know. And you made the decision probably almost a decade ago, right?
Yeah, probably 7 years.
About
7 years back.
That Databricks was the horse to back in this race. Now, it's funny looking at LinkedIn, and like a lot of people that kind of openly canned Databricks are now fully on the bandwagon, right? Why did you have such strong conviction about Databricks so long ago?
Yeah, look, I think in the first instance, it was really about, the separation of compute and storage was a very big one for us. But, whenever we tried to back our winning horses, we had a look at really where Microsoft were going, because one of the plays we also had way back then was really platforming on Microsoft Azure. But Databricks had a very enticing product roadmap. The Delta or the Lakehouse actually came later, but there was a lot to like about the typical challenges we saw in really OLAP spaces on a SQL Server or on Oracle. There were certain parameters around them which was really constraining to our customers, and Databricks really had a model that started to look as though those constraints really weren't going to be a problem for us. So we backed that horse a long time ago. And you're right, Pete, that way back then, there was a lot of pundits in the market that really doubted that. They were thinking we're a bit crazy. We'd gone early on it. But look, we've been vindicated many times over now, and Databricks have really, their product roadmap has really been almost a delight to watch over the years, because you and I will sit down and we'll ponder the future roadmap of us as Insight Factory and how we deliver the best value for our customers. And really, Databricks plays a very large part of that. And the question we often ask is, where do we need Databricks and Azure to go if they're our core platform partners? Where do we need them to go to really achieve some of the things that we want to achieve as Insight Factory? And the Databricks Summit just gone, the 2025 one, really delivered on many, if not most of those fronts.
Awesome. Well, let's unpack that. And I think that, again, you're probably the only person that I know that got up at 1 a.m. to watch the keynotes live. But look, let's start to unpack it. And there's a few really big announcements that have come out of there. And so maybe we'll just navigate through some of the big announcements. Maybe start with LakeBase. I thought that was just a really compelling announcement, and for many reasons. And I know we've been talking a lot about the fusion of OLAP and OLTP and how that comes together to enable a whole bunch of things. But, we saw the acquisition of Neon, and we saw that as a really positive. We saw that as a really positive step forward. But Mick, the announcement of LakeBase, I know you've been in and had a play with it. What does it mean? What do you think this means for the practitioners?
Let's just go back to what we all saw as the typical challenges, but certainly in my role as CTO and really creating a value proposition for our customers. OLAP is it's a very big part of a data and AI space, but we cannot ignore OLTP. And increasingly our customers were asking us that if we're generating such value on the OLAP side of the business, how can that not be translated into their transactional part of the business to offer that value into that space? And we had ways of doing that. So we would have the Lakehouse and everything was working perfectly in there from an OLAP point of view. And then we'd farm that data through a reverse ELT type scenario out to a transactional database. We'd layer over the top of that a nice transactional UI, and we'd have that information available to that transactional space. One of the challenges there, of course, is that once data is updated in a transactional sense, it needs to feed its way back into the Lakehouse in a timely manner. And so one of our challenges there was, how do you then take the goodness of human feedback or human transactional space and then feed that back into the Lakehouse for further processing. And it was all highly disconnected. Like, we had a way of doing it and it worked. But when you looked under the covers, it was really, a lot of different products cobbled together in a way that kind of just met the grade. And for our customers, it was an extreme value proposition. It was a great thing to offer. And again, Pete, I know you and I have said, what would we most like for Christmas from Databricks? And mine has always been a transactional space sitting right across the top of a lakehouse. Now, I would have been happy with an Excel layer that sat across the top of the lakehouse so that you can just say, analyze this great lake of information in Excel, and the connector's just nice and live. But when Databricks purchased Neon, we saw the play. I didn't realise at the time Databricks had actually been involved with Neon for 2 years, so it's been quite a long-term play for Databricks. But when they announced that, suddenly the excitement was in the room of the fusion of OLAP and OLTP together. So you get your transactional stability and speed, and you get your OLAP power, latency, and the capacity. And those two things came together very nicely. So we kind of dared to dream a bit. And then the conference really talked about that being a layer that was all in one, right on that Databricks ecosystem. And so we've started playing with that to understand that value prop. And one of the really nice things in this space is that I can work in an OLTP sense on Postgres. And again, Postgres is a very cool database system for us, very ANSI compliant. It meets all of the things we try and be in terms of that open source or very standards compliant organization. And as soon as you get that transactional space, as soon as that updates, it's almost immediately available in your Lakehouse for OLAP purposes. And so, in many ways, my number one Christmas request came due in June this year. It was just a wonderful announcement.
Yeah. And I think to continue on that, like, we're seeing a lot of really interesting stuff happen. Databricks Apps and Databricks AI BI dashboards, without even talking about Genie yet.
Yeah.
And this announcement of Databricks One, which I think is a big strategic underpinning behind that thing as well. But let's talk a little bit about what we saw in Databricks Apps that we got excited about. And there's probably been a few other things that have been flowing around the dashboard side before the conference as well that have been really interesting. But let's maybe start with the Databricks Apps and what we saw there and what we can take away from that.
Yeah, look, again, I think from a Databricks offering, Databricks Apps really gave us quite an interesting thing where we could layer a UI part across the Lakehouse, again, to make use of really what is a wonderful trove of information and data underpinning the Lakehouse. But where Databricks Apps have gone now is, first of all, the Databricks Apps space had Python library sitting on top of it, which again, we're very good with. But internally and with our own products, we're a very React-based UI company as well. So we've got a lot of skills on that React side, and it is a very good framework to build a very effective and performant UIs on top of. So the announcement that Databricks Apps would actually cater for React and JavaScript user interfaces or libraries sitting on top of them or incorporated into them, really exciting announcement for us. But on top of that, and really, I think where the killer is here is that suddenly a Databricks app sitting very natively in that Databricks ecosystem, really making use of all of the security that's there, the foundations of the Lakehouse that sit there. Unity Catalog underpins it. But now we've got, of course, this Postgres capability or the OLTP capability. So all of a sudden we can write for us React-based user interfaces that transact extremely quickly and very efficiently into a Lakehouse paradigm. That data is immediately made available in the Lakehouse and the Delta Table ecosystem through a very efficient sync, and that information is offered back into that app space as an update. So we can do things like take some feedback from a user. We can feed that into the Lake, into the Postgres side, have that transported across or synced across into the Delta side, and all of a sudden we've got our AI ML program coming up around that to spin up some calculations, predictions, or whatever magic we can conjure, and that's immediately fed back into the app space for feedback to the user. It's just a wonderful fusion of some really high-end tech.
Yeah. Now, I know there were some announcements too about connectivity with Power Apps in there as well. But I guess, like, from our perspective of where we've been working, and we do a lot of work, obviously, in the Power Apps space.
Yeah.
I guess we've just been waiting for Databricks Apps to catch up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I kind of see that some of that stuff is evolving at the moment, and that just provides like a lot of unlocked capability, which kind of leads us a bit to what we're starting to see in the dashboarding in Databricks as well. So I guess again, we're heavy in Power Platform, and I think that is been a really nice solution for us.
Yeah.
Where you can push it out, you have a nice semantic model in the Power Platform, and you build nice dashboards, and a lot of people have that, and that's a great solution, right? Again, we've kind of been waiting for the Databricks dashboarding capability to catch up, and it's had some limitations. From our perspective, just not quite there already because it's lacked a few of the key things that you really need. Now, just sort of what we've seen and where we think it's going. I mean, we saw the evolution of metrics coming out. I think we saw drillability and a few of the other really nice things starting to come out in the dashboard space. And what we're starting to see with the app play and the dashboard play is this is becoming a real ecosystem for production grade dashboarding apps, all that kind of stuff. And when you get with the proposition of now, do I need to build my model and then push it out to Power Platform and use the semantic model out there and build my measures and all those sort of stuff out here? What that means, I've got two governance models right now. So you wrap Unity Catalog around that. You've got one governance model. I've got my dashboarding in there under Unity Catalog governance. I've got my metrics, which are now not in measures in my model out here. They're back at my data source. It just seems like it's all heading in the right direction very quickly.
Yeah, look, it's been wonderful. I'm going to just unpack that one a bit too, because, Power Apps, again, a really clever technology for Microsoft, a low-code environment. But, when we have a look at the pricing model for Power Apps, the most effective underlying database that we saw with Power Apps was Azure SQL, because, again, we could, in the days before Summit 25 came through, we would push transactional style information from our OLAP space back into Azure SQL. We'd layer Power Apps over the top of that. Again, Azure SQL, from a Power Apps perspective, is a premium connector. So Microsoft were charging you more handsomely because you wanted to use a capability to be able to achieve this in Power Apps. Notwithstanding the clever technology that Power Apps is, it was a bit of a crusty licensing model. They knew you would be dragged into an Azure SQL base or one of those more relational databases, and they were going to charge you premium for the privilege of doing that, which we didn't think sat very well, certainly not with our customers. So that was one thing. And really where Databricks Apps has gone there is that, as part of, and it wasn't so much Summit 25, but at the same time, they have released a connector now, a Databricks connector from Power Apps into Databricks. So it sits directly over the top of the lake. And look, congratulations, that's a nice connector. And if we had no other option, I'd actually be quite happy with that. It's that Power Apps no longer has to read or no longer has to connect to an Azure SQL. It connects straight over Lakehouse. I'm not sure about the read-write capability of that connector. Again, I just haven't researched it very much. But where Databricks Apps are really sneaking in there is that we can use these Python or React frameworks. Vibe coding. Look, I've never been a real fan, but I've seen a demo that you vibe code up your UI. It's connected in both as a transactional as an informational base. Your data. And suddenly you've got a very rich, very low touch or low code environment that's now sitting very natively on Databricks from both a read and a write perspective. And I think certainly for us as Insight Factory, our requirement to use a tool outside of this ecosystem in Power Apps has now diminished significantly. And I wouldn't be surprised if, there comes a time shortly where it will be removed entirely. We'll sit in that space. Now I just want to go on to the Power BI side of things. Look, dashboards, and I think internally in Insight Factory, I've made some commentary that dashboards have had their great day. I still think they're very important in an organisation, but the day where dashboards ruled the scene, I think have passed. The Genie or the AI space has really taken that realm. It's almost a case for us of why restrict your customer to ask a question that you've already answered through your dashboard. They don't ask those kind of questions. They want to ask anything that comes to their mind. So AI is going to play a much bigger feature here. So for us, Power BI as a reporting tool, a very clever tool. Again, we use it well, but it's got a couple of limitations. And ones we've discussed in-house is that when you define a measure, first of all, someone in our organisation, in fact, got quite a few experts in Power BI, they've got to learn DAX as a language. To become efficient in this space, you learn DAX. That is another language, and we might argue it's very Excel based, so it shouldn't be too hard to learn, but it is not your native skill set. We're very strong on being experts in our space, and when you've got to know a lot of tooling or a lot of coding skills, that's a problem. So you've got to be good at DAX. But the thing that we're probably not like the most is the fact that you define your measures or even your calculated dimensions, and they now sit in your reporting layer. They are separated from your data layer. And the Insight Factory philosophy, that is just wrong. You rest your business rules as early as possible and you wrap them around your data in your data layer and you govern them all from there. So Power BI is, or in fact, any reporting tool's always been an issue for us in the sense that we're defining great business rules, great capability sitting in a reporting tool. And second to that, the row level security or even column level security. We define that now in Power BI as well. Unity Catalog has already defined it. We redefine it inside Power BI. So we've just got issues. And again, it's been a very good platform for us and our customers, but it's time to move on. And so we have been watching the Databricks dashboard space very closely because no matter what I think about that prediction that dashboards have had their day, customers still demand dashboards and there's still a very strong use case for them. We just like to have dashboards without the limitations that we think Power BI brings. A very powerful ecosystem, but in most cases, our customers aren't after all of that capability that Power BI offer. So we had a look at Databricks dashboards. Again, in the early days, look, it was a pretty underwhelming experience, and Databricks acknowledged that and they've worked very hard on it. And we think they've now got to the stage, a couple of things that we love about Databricks dashboards now is that they introduce drill through, a really important thing we use a lot in our reporting. It's very important for our customers. It tells our data story beautifully. So drill through, really important. Multi-page reporting, and just recently announced was the ability to carry your filters between different pages of your reports. Really important in what we do and we deliver to our customers and now available inside that Databricks dashboards. But for us, the great thing is that, first of all, Databricks introduced the ability for measures and dimensions inside the Databricks dashboard. And you could argue there that that's come back closer, but it's still a definition that sits inside a dashboard. It's not the place we as Insight Factory like to see these things living. They've got to live on your data. So when we saw the metric views released, we've been playing around with them, a wonderful feature. Suddenly your definition of measures, and again, the nice thing about defining a measure, it is completely agnostic of your filtering. It will respect your filtering, but it's not driven by your filtering. Land it right against your data. So it's not only a reporting platform that can make use of your measures and your dimensions, anything that is now querying that data source makes use of the same thing. And importantly for us, it's governed by Unity Catalog. Wonderful feature.
We're in violent agreement about where the dashboards need to head. I mean, we've just seen firsthand with large organizations the proliferation of dashboards within an organization. Organizations don't need more. They need fewer, higher quality dashboards. And then one of the things that, again, where I think this is going and why this is really important is I'll touch a couple of areas here, right? Databricks One, AI BI Genie, and then Agentbricks. And I have this view that there's this coalescing of capability towards the Databricks One experience, which I'm all for. And why I think it's important is, again, just to drill back to the idea of, I don't think technology leaders and organizations want more dashboards. They want fewer. And then when I have tested, stable, reliable dashboards, it's the proliferation of other questions that need to be asked, right? And like that's where we're seeing the noise. And dashboards, you talk about all the democratization, it just never really quite got there, did it? And so I think that the idea of having well-formed, high-quality dashboards with this capability of facilitating unstructured questions on your data models and beyond is where it's going. And for me, like that's the vision I'm seeing with Databricks One. And I'll come back to that in a second. When we've been super impressed with AI BI Genie. Right?
Very impressed.
Out of the box, the ability to build a data model, provide the key definitions, some annotations, some instructions, and out of the box have a production-ready system that allows people to query their data models in natural language. We're super impressed with where they've taken it. They've just announced deep research as well, which is going to be better, more structured for those multi-stage, more complex questions where effectively it'll be, passed to a supervisor. They'll come up with an analytics plan and come back with your answers to that. I love the way that's unfolding. And we'll come to Agent Bricks after, but ultimately the ability to have, multi-agent capabilities and all those sorts of things in there. Way I see that play being, you've got that single pane of glass over your organization where I can ask a question. It will either direct me to a Databricks dashboard, an app, an agent, a Genie space. And I don't need to know that there's 100 Genie spaces out there. I don't need to know there's all these different agents. I've just asked a natural language question. And it's either going to take me to a reliable dashboard or it's going to give me the answer to the question that I want. And that's where I think it's going. I think it's a really smart play from Databricks. And I think it's where things probably need to go. We're behind that, right? And I think that that's what we want to start introducing to our clients because I think we're going to be able to get them there quickly.
Yeah, look, I think, our mantra again at Insight Factory is don't make the client work for an answer. They've got a question, let them ask their question and let the smarts of AI and all of these frameworks determine how they're going to answer it. Whereas at the moment, the customer's almost got to come pre-armed with more knowledge than that. It needs to know where it's going to find that answer. It needs to know that, I've got a dashboard sitting in this folder and I can go and have a look at it. And then I've got to look at page 4 and that might tell me something about the question I want to ask. Or it's part of an AI BI Genie and I've got to go to this workspace and I've got to ask a question in this way. And they're going to lead me to my answer. And again, our mantra inside is there is way too much inertia needed to get to your answer. There's got to be a better way. So look, even before Summit 25 came through with Databricks One, we were working on our own multi-agent frameworks for exactly the answer to that problem. And that was that how do you let somebody ask a very natural language question and have the agents or the suite of agents determine where they're going to direct that to get it answered and return the answer in the form that's most appropriate to the way the question was asked. So we'd actually developed nice prototypes for that. And then Summit 25 hits and they showed Databricks One. And that was almost our vision for what we wanted our UI to look like, is that, just a very simple panel with all of the things you've seen before, your relevance, and ask the question in the middle, and it works out the magic and returns you the most appropriate result. So the only disappointing thing I have with Databricks One is that it's in beta and I'm going to have to wait for it because we've got customers that would eat that for brekkie tomorrow in terms of what we want to deliver in terms of an ease of use. Wonderful.
Well played, Databricks.
Yeah, well played.
Look, before I move away from this, because there's a few other things we want to dive into as well. Even before the conference, there were a couple of really interesting things that I think kind of just slid through. So we had recursive CTEs, procedural SQL. I mean, they didn't get a lot of fanfare, but man, they're super important things that have just unlocked stuff that we've just found limiting.
And just on that one too, Pete, look, one of the things we do a lot of work in, and we find it very valuable for our customers, is hierarchical analysis. Allow your business to determine the structure that is relevant to them of the entire business. And we might have many different views that make up a business structure, depending on who's asking the questions, and build hierarchies to represent those views. So the truth lies right at the very bottom where the value is, and right at the very top where your organization sits. But how you slice and dice that through this hierarchy, that should be up to you and your context of your data. And recursive CT is a really important part of solving that problem. I come from a SQL background, and that has been one of my great disappointments on betting on Databricks and their SQL, is that recursive CTs were not handled. So we had other ways, other hack ways of being able to achieve hierarchical analysis in Databricks. But they've been not so much clumsy, but they've just been hacks. And we just don't like landing hacks. And so when they announced recursive CTEs, we're now on a move to build a Databricks app across the top of that to build effective hierarchies so that businesses can view the way we're going to dissect their business and make sure it's relevant to them. And then the recursive CTs sitting inside now Databricks, we have the ability to process those hierarchies too. So that was a fantastic announcement. And there's been some other ones as well that have really brought this game to the fore. I think procedural logic inside SQL again. We've got a lot of customers that come from an Oracle, mainly a SQL Server background. Always been a problem is, how do you take these really multifaceted stored procedures and convert them? And again, we've developed AI agents that'll do that, and they do that reasonably effectively. But again, it's changing the way that works to suit the restrictions we found in Databricks with a lack of procedural logic in SQL. The introduction of that through Databricks Runtime 16.3 or 4 onwards, just wonderful. Suddenly we can represent very rich procedural code in a set-based language. I can't even begin to say how powerful that is. Find customers that are all in on Iceberg. They might be a Snowflake customer. It's probably one of our biggest ones. We do have quite a few big Snowflake customers. But the demonstration given at Databricks, and for all those that see that, apologies that I'll rehash this, but I just love the way that you could create an Iceberg managed table inside Databricks Unity Catalog, have it update from one of a multitude of tools, including Snowflake or DuckDB was an impressive one, and then have that replayed, and you could see that inside Unity Catalog, so it worked through that API seamlessly. But then I think the kicker for me, and I think this is really where industry is going to stand up and take some note here, is that now inside Unity catalogs, to that one space that's meant to govern everything, we could apply some governance protocols in that space. And when we next reviewed that data in DuckDB or Snowflake, those governance rules applied. So that was a very, very impressive piece of tech. And I think that is going to go gangbusters.
Yeah, immediate application, right?
Yeah.
Very quickly. Probably another one I just want to dig into a little bit here as well was Lakeflow Designer. Keen for your thoughts on Lakeflow Designer. Like, it was an impressive view. Yeah, keen to hear your thoughts, mate, on Designer.
Well, look, and I know we call it Lakeflow Designer, but I'm just going to probably say it is Lakeflow Designer. It was a very impressive demonstration. It's probably one of the areas I haven't really touched on, but I know Databricks were very strong on talking about the democratization of data. And we talked just recently about the dangers of democratizing your Power BI infrastructure, because as soon as you do, you build it and they will come, but they will come in their hundreds sometimes or thousands. And suddenly you get an ecosystem that is just blown out of control. With Lakeflow Designer, what I saw in the demonstration was the ability through just English style questioning or directioning that it would build that as a no code or very low code if you want to get to that point. This environment of being able to connect up these fairly isolated things together. Also the vibe coding where in the demonstration, they just uploaded just an image of what this thing should look like. And the engine understood that. And it connected everything together, went through a nice little dependency graph and produced the output that was required. Well, as data democratization from almost ingesting data through to delivery of outcomes was a pretty impressive demo. For us, the jury's still out. We have quite a structured way we like to deliver that because in that beautiful ease and no or low code environment, where do you put your parameters of quality and accuracy and those kind of things? And we're really big on that too, is that getting an output's half of your challenge, making sure that output is timely, complete, accurate. That's another very big part of the game. And we stand by the output that's coming out the end of these pipelines. And so I think Lakeflow Designer, a wonderful start. Where do we see those quality metrics starting to play in there too?
Yeah, awesome. Another one that seemed to get lost in the ether a little bit was the Zerobus API.
Yeah.
Now, again, maybe when it's hidden amongst all the other goodness that's coming out, that something like that just doesn't get the fanfare that it deserves. Keen to hear your thoughts on Zerobus and what that, for us, there's, again, immediate things that this solves, right?
Yeah. So, look, we deal with heavy asset industries, and they tend to have a lot of very rapidly moving data. So IoT devices that are sitting in mining trucks and mining equipment or transport, you have these emitters and they're emitting events all the time in real time. And typically Kafka plays a part of that ecosystem. And again, it works. It works. But when we saw Zerobus and really taking all the complexity of that infrastructure that generally sits in the middle of the IoT device and Lakehouse suddenly was gone, and there's this almost direct connect in and real-time ingestion Well, I mean, I almost can't wait to see what we're going to do with that. And as we simplify our architecture of what an insight factory is, involving sometimes those Kafka routes, I think it's really exciting day. Zerobus, I think, particularly for heavy asset industries that we deal with, is going to be a total game changer.
Cool. So probably just as we sort of changed tack, Agentbricks came out with like a lot of fanfare.
Oh, yeah.
And I, again, impressed with where they're going with that. And so one of the things that I think is kind of plagued the whole AI ML industry for many years. I mean, I remember 6 years ago, you go and you hear, 90% of models that get built don't reach production and 90% of the ones that do don't get used.
Yep.
And lots of exciting stuff, but we're heading in the right direction, but we can't get stuff to production. 12 months ago, same story, lots of cool stuff happening in LLMs, getting them to production. I think Agentbricks in its very early formative stages provides a really interesting perspective here on productionizing agents in organization. And so I think it's a watch this space thing, but what they've been able to demonstrate in the demos that I've seen, I haven't been able to get in and play with it yet. We'll need to turn that on so we can get in and actually have a look at what's happening in there. But the theory there of being able to abstract away the complexity of all the stuff you need to take one of these things to production, because it's really hard. We have a lot of production grade agent frameworks running with clients globally, and there's a hell of a lot of infrastructure and things that need to go into making that happen. Very easy to build a POC, proof of concept, around an agent and getting an agent to work, but taking it to production and having it work in a stable, reliable manner is a whole different thing. And so, when we're talking about being able to do things with data models or with documents, I've got to figure out how I get, for example, that into a vector DB, and then I've got to work the embedding model that I want to do. And then I've got to work out how to most effectively train and optimize and then get my human in the loop feedback back from that. And what I read in the documentation, what I see is that this is where they're going with that. It's the ability to accelerate the path to production grade agents. And you saw the ability to create synthetic data sets that can be used for testing and things like awesome. And then it's still relatively limited in the applications that they put forward, but it's the first announcement, right? And it's in beta. So I'm expecting a hell of a lot more to come down the track with Agentbricks. So I look at some of the things that we've done over the last 12 months in building sort of multi-agent systems, and I see kind of immediate applicability of some of those projects that could potentially be handled by an Agentbricks type solution. Document processing, extraction of information out of these documents, I think is something a lot of people are doing, and they seem to have a nice way forward with that, which can hopefully, it's not limiting our ability to deliver these solutions. It's just making it easier to do that. We've got a whole team of very talented AI engineers that bring this stuff to life. But for a lot of organizations out there that don't have that footprint of necessarily that capability or that experience to do that, the ability to abstract away a lot of the complexity is great. And I think it is a path to getting a lot more of these things to production, which is a great thing.
Absolutely, Pete. And look, that's probably when I saw the demo of Agentbricks, and I know our AI ML team, they work very hard on this stuff, and they're very good at getting things to production. That's been one of the great wins of Insight Factory, is that we're very proud of the number of models we start to develop, and they make it to production and generate some very compelling outcomes for our customers. So it's a great thing. So when I saw Agentbricks, again, very, very slick demo, and it almost made it too easy. So in some ways, in a very selfish way for me, I almost found that's democratizing something that we have worked very hard to get good at. So in other words, it's kind of allowing the field to try and catch you up, right? So in a selfish way, I was blown away. We've worked so hard on getting good at something that is just not done well in the marketplace. But hats off to Databricks, because that was a coup. How you do that in an automated way, in the way in which I saw the demo, and again, I haven't played with it since. Really impressive piece of tech. And again, the nice thing about that too is that when Databricks One comes along, that is just one of the things that Databricks One can link into. So again, a really very tight story being told here.
Yep.
Very cool story.
It's one of those ones too where you think about the term agent ops is now being kind of thrown around. And it's so true. I mean, I've spent many years in ML ops, right? Like looking at a model once it's deployed and it's running and you're managing the hygiene of that model in production. Super important. Agents are the same. And I think we're in that position where we're seeing a lot of proof of concepts, but how many people are taking those through to actual deployed production? Because it's taken us a while to figure out how we wrap the guardrails around it, how we get feedback loops, how we feel comfortable to push these agent frameworks into the wild in a way that they are going to be reliable and they're going to be managed. And that's been an effort, right? So this agent ops thing with Agent Bricks, I think is, they've obviously seen it coming, right? And I think it fills a really complex void. So look, haven't been in. I think we'll do maybe a session a bit later when we can get in and really play with this stuff and test it and just sort of see exactly what it can do. But I don't think this is going away. I think there's a big investment coming here, I think, and even I guess the transformative nature of these agents, if you'd asked me 12 months ago what can be achieved with these, I've fundamentally changed my opinion in the last 12 months of what can be unlocked with this capability. Very excited about it. And even you go back 2 years ago, it probably wasn't even in the lexicon of thought of what could be achieved with this stuff. So,
and Peter, I think I agree with you there too. I know when AI hit us, ChatGPT was released and the world went a bit crazy on AI, and suddenly, you almost couldn't pick up an object that didn't have AI in it. And I was waiting for Weet-Bix to present that it was built with AI. And so, I was a natural skeptic. Is that, this is part of that great bulge of sort of, it's just a delusional proclaiming. And then we're going to go through that disillusionment when it doesn't turn out to be, what they promised it might be. But we're seeing the opposite, is that, I just didn't see the possibilities of what AI can do. And I won't give away too much, but we demoed to a customer a couple of weeks ago. And in that demo, it took us a week to put that together with agents. And what we presented to them blew their mind. Now, that took us a week using some of the power of agents and the expertise of our teams, but just not possible to get that outcome 2 years back. The only disappointing thing for me, and I'm looking at you, Databricks, is that Agent Bricks, there's got to be better names than that.
All right. Probably a couple of other ones that have popped out as well, just sort of around the periphery. So MLflow 3 came out. Which again, I'm still in the reading of what that means. Where I'm really excited about that is some of the new inclusions around generative AI, in terms of the being able to take the traces and everything like that from your agent systems in there. And right now, there are solutions out there to do that, but if this is an expanding capability within MLflow, then I'm all in. Really good. But again, with that one, I think we'll unpack that a little bit further once we've had a chance to really dive into MLflow 3 and see what's there. Gemini models natively available
wonderful
in Databricks
news
as well. Again, just becoming like the central place to come for everything.
And that's, again, for us, that's really important to the story that we like to tell as well, is that when you set up your infrastructure in a nice, secured way, you don't have things that are starting to permeate that boundary and going places you didn't approve. And in the past, that's been very hard to do because, quite often you might reach out of that environment to something else because you needed it. There was an absence of that capability or functionality within the Databricks environment. But what we're finding now is that, Databricks, again, very strong innovators in the space, but that whole thing about the Gemini models or anything Google coming into a Databricks environment, again, music to our ears. Suddenly we've got an environment that's surrounded very nice in a secure way, and we're not needing to go outside of that perimeter any longer. Great.
Absolutely.
Great news.
Now, the last one that I want to talk about, and then maybe some other areas that you want to pick into, let's talk Lakebridge. So we obviously saw the acquisition of BladeBridge. Now, we participate heavily in data migrations and, what this means for what are generally very long-winded, manual, complex undertakings. The BladeBridge acquisition was a smart and interesting one. I'm really interested. So we've opened up the code base and had a bit of a look through that as well. And obviously we have a view and a play on, agentic migration as well. I'm really interested to see where they take it. Obviously, one of the hypotheses here is that Databricks has a very compelling platform. Performance, cost, innovation is where you want to be. But if I've got a massive legacy of historical data marts and data warehouses on other technologies, achieving that value proposition is a costly outcome.
Yeah.
If I can save you $1 million a year moving to Databricks, but it's going to cost me $20 million to do that, it's probably not going to pass the investment hurdle, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that ability to be able to supercharge a migration, absolutely huge thing to occur. Now, I know you're a seasoned engineer who's incurred some pretty big migrations in the past as well. My view on this is that transpilation is a small component of your migration effort. Now, to be able to really achieve the full scale of the full reduction of complexity and associated cost in a migration, there's a lot to it, right?
There's a lot
that needs to happen. So I'm watching this space a little bit on Lakebridge just to see what else comes.
Yeah.
Because if I look at sort of my experiences through this as well, is that a huge amount of the time and cost is about understanding the scope, taking that mass of scripts that have been written that take those input sets and create your target dimensions, facts, whatever they are. There's a huge amount of effort in terms of untangling that mess. These days, you would argue with transpilation is I can use Claude or, whatever and get a transpilation outcome relatively quick. Granted, they're not going to have the goodness of things like procedural SQL and things that are coming out now, but you're also spending huge amounts of time on reconciling and fixing your reconciliation efforts. And then often when you're looking at the way things have been built over 20 years of people writing SQL or whatever, you're just going to think about doing things differently, right? And so I think that to fully achieve the outcome of being able to migrate legacy estates to modern Lakehouse, there's a fair bit to it. And for that to be successful so that people can fully appreciate the migration effort, there's quite a bit needs to be done from an agent perspective. And obviously we have a view on this and we've been pretty heavily invested in this. And we think agent frameworks across that full spectrum are going to deliver some real value. And we're already seeing that with agentic migration.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But again, it's interesting to see, we have very strong perspectives of where the time is spent.
Yeah.
And where an agent is going to lean in most effectively to strip that out. So keen on your thoughts on Lakebridge and where you think they might take it.
Yeah, well, look, again, we've also invested quite heavily in this space. We've got agentic migration frameworks, which we're continuing to tune as we do more and more migrations. But the transpilation is an interesting one because, again, now that we've got procedural SQL, that's going to make that transpilation process a little more one-to-one in terms of, in the early days of BladeBridge, it would transpile something which was a huge stored procedure into a lot of different things with functions and everything to achieve the same result. So I think with procedural SQL now in Databricks, it's going to be a little lighter on that touch, which would be good. But where we see value in migrations, we normally do like a two-step process here, which is land the code which was part of the incumbent ecosystem, land that in a Databricks environment to get a result and make sure that result is the same when it's run through the same payloads. But second, and I think really where we add value is that a like for like is one thing because that lands you in a Databricks environment and now you can use the tooling to do some great stuff. But we want to optimize beyond that. So we want to say, taking the code as it existed in that original environment, which may have been developed 20 years ago, and landing in Databricks so it works still, we then like to put agents over the top to now optimize that. What are the new constructs and the new things that Databricks or these modern ecosystems can do on that kind of structure to produce a much faster, cleaner, more compelling result, whatever it is. If you're doing a like for like, you've achieved something. But we think you haven't achieved anywhere near as much as you can. So we like the optimization step on the end. And look, Lakebridge appears to be doing that. We know of BladeBridge and we've seen BladeBridge in action. We've actually used that ourselves. It does an okay job of introducing you to the effort you're about to undertake with a migration. And that's normally the scary number. You see that and it's going to take quite a bit of work. But the nice thing for us, again, a very structured approach to say that transpilation is actually almost the easy part now with agents. The optimization is the challenging part. How do you make that sing in this new environment?
Yeah, excellent. So, in terms of the conference, what are you most excited about, Mick?
Oh, look, it's definitely Lakebase. I just think, for many years, and again, I hadn't until Ali Godsey had said that they'd been, I think it was Ali, but someone had mentioned that they'd been working with Neon for 2 years. And again, I like to keep my ear pretty close to the ground, and I normally hear some of these whispers, but I hadn't heard that one. And for years, in fact, for the 7 years I've been in and around the Databricks ecosystem, I've always lamented the fact that it's just really an OLAP ecosystem and not really transactional. And that's always been hard. I've always been an OLAP guy, but the transactional connection to your OLAP space is always strong and should always be strong. So for me, Lakebase and really their ability, like they came out with the announcements 2 weeks before the conference that they'd purchase Neon or a big investor in Neon. And then 2 weeks later, they show a demo of it fully integrated into the Lakehouse ecosystem, the syncing between a Postgres table and a Delta table, the collaboration of OLAP and OLTP together. I mean, Santa squeezed down my chimney that night.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think from my perspective, the open source training.
Yeah. Oh, actually, that's another good one.
A bit shitty that that we didn't have access to the training, but look, another great one. But look, for me, I'm excited about Databricks, but I need to see more.
Yep.
I need to be able to get hands on and see where they're taking that. But for me, again, Databricks One, it's not out yet.
Yeah.
But that whole, like we elevate it up and we think about the strategic vision. I just think that Databricks as a vendor have just achieved alignment with customers, like actual organizations consuming insights more effectively than anyone.
Yeah.
Right? And I just think they are so on point. And the bit where if I was to draw a practical example, now I'm in an organization that has a small data team. We struggle to get the insight we need. I'm an executive within that business and I want answers to questions. What do I do? Well, I have to raise a ticket or I have to make a call. I have to have an analyst write a query, come back to me with an answer.
Yep.
I want the same one in 3 months' time. I get a different answer. That whole world is going away.
Yep.
And I feel that, Databricks One, the unlocking of AI BI Genie, better dashboards within there is this big strategic move that is appealing to such a mass part of the market.
Yeah.
And having seen it unfolding, this is achievable, right? And so where I see the world going with this is that world where you do have a set of really highly tested, curated dashboard endpoints, and then you have this ability to ask natural language, unstructured questions through like a Databricks One type portal, and the executive doesn't care where the answer comes from, right? And that answer may straddle a Genie space. It may straddle policy and procedure that is existing within your Mosaic Vector DB in there. And they ask a multi-stage question. It comes back with the answer. Check out this dashboard. Here's the policy and the link to it. And here's the data that you want to support that. I have a very specific question I want to answer. And I just see this stuff coming together beautifully. And I just see such a direct connect to the market there. And it's going to be so appealing to people who have just been asking for insight, who have been asking for answers to specific questions. Just kind of see all of those things we've talked about today, whether it be, Lakebase apps, agents, it's all starting to fulfill that outcome so effectively.
Yep.
And it's not just about the developers, the engineers and the data scientists.
Yeah.
Right? This is transcending the development community now to make outcomes more achievable.
Yeah, I think, look, you're on a good point there too, Pete, in terms of the amount of effort it takes to curate, let's just say, a Power BI series of dashboards. That takes significant effort. And you're answering a very predetermined set of questions, giving them flexibility in how they might slice and dice. But the dashboard is only capable of answering a limited set of questions. And that takes effort to get those out in the wild into production. And then you got to support them. Why not really focus on that AI BI Genie space, getting your semantic models right, adding your keys to let Genie know how structures are connected to each other. Really big play for us. And we've seen some great results in Genie from that. Develop your metric views right against your data layer and even maybe develop some of your dashboards, but you spend your effort there and you can answer any dealer question. I think that is great bang for buck. Don't spend it in your dashboard space building dashboards that answer a limited set. Bring it back into that Databricks ecosystem. Spend your time and expertise there and answer any question. And deliver that out through that framework like Databricks One, where the customer does not have to build inertia to get an answer. He just asks the question, gets the answer without thinking anything else. I just want the answer to this and I don't care where it gets it. I just want to know that when it gets it, it's correct. So it's built off those metric views or whatever is underlying it. It's not relying on a Power BI report written by contractor number 2 that's got a different view on the world and is not quite as tidy on their code structures as contractor number 1 that developed version 1 of this report. And lo and behold, the numbers now slightly different, causing confusion, lack of trust. The classics. I just reckon if you get that nucleus right, the rest of the game is won.
Yep. And let's not forget the Unity catalog governance model that sits over that whole ecosystem, right? Is that you're going to avoid some of the horror stories you hear about people unearthing things through these systems that they shouldn't be unearthing, right? Because the indexing is going beyond the understood governance model.
More than you should.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, mate, thank you. I think this has been good to debrief. I know it's been very exciting what we've seen.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's a wonderful year ahead in terms of not only what was announced at the conference, but I think what we're about to see unfold in the coming months.
Yeah. And look, what I'll say there too, Pete, I know we've talked mainly Databricks here. We build Databricks and Azure, and even some of the Azure announcements have been very, very strong in the ability to create a performant and highly secure infrastructure that underpins your data and AI program. Really impressive at making Databricks that first-class asset within Azure. Just tidies that whole game beautifully. So, hats off to what Microsoft have done in that Azure space. Databricks, for your 2025 summit, you blew it out of the park.
Great. Well, this will be the first in the Factory Fireside Tech series. And so we will be continuing to keep our finger on the pulse of all things coming out in the world of tech, in particular related to data and AI. Obviously, Databricks a key one, but we're also going to be looking at different technologies coming out from different providers. So thanks for joining the first of the Factory Fireside.
Bye for now.